All right. Well, first of all, I have been excited for 2 weeks waiting for this night again because it was so much fun last week. Can everybody hear me okay? Nod your heads if we're good. Okay. Also, I want to clarify something that I mentioned last week about food for your chickens. I said that you should offer, if you're feeding a pellet food, that you should also offer some kind of a calcium. It's not necessary for you to add calcium into the chicken's diet if they are being fed a commercial pelleted food or a crumbled, because those kinds of feeds already have calcium in it. But it's not going to hurt anything, but just know that you don't have to do that if you start getting eggs that have weird shells and stuff like that, and we'll start discussing that next meeting, then we'll talk about some calcium supplements at that time. Also, fruits and vegetables are very good for your chickens. So if you have leftovers, feed it to your chickens. It's perfectly fine to do that. It shouldn't be their main diet, but you can certainly give them like apple peels or whole apples. The only thing that I know of that you should not feed them is grapes. Grapes and raisins are not good for chickens. So don't feed them grapes and raisins, but extra food out of your garden. They love zucchini, they love pumpkins, they love pumpkin seeds. All of those things are actually really, really good for your chickens, and they enjoy eating them. It keeps them from getting bored with eating the same thing all the time. I also want to encourage you to take notes during these meetings so that you can go back and look at them and see things that you have learned or things that you want to remember for your chickens. And then the questions, for sure. If you have questions, put them in the chats and we'll get them taken care of at the end of the meeting. All right, so if anybody's expecting really cute, fluffy chicken pictures tonight, that's not what we're going to be seeing. Tonight, we're going to be discussing illnesses that chickens can get and parasites that chickens can get. And so you're going to see some interesting pictures, but they're not necessarily pretty pictures. The reason I want to touch on this is because in order to have a healthy chicken, you have to see what an unhealthy chicken looks like so that you can address that and get it taken care of. So let me come down here to, oh, Brandy, can I get you to enable the screen sharing for me?
I'll hurry and make you a co-host.
I should have reminded you of that beforehand. I apologize. All right, now if I can remember how to do this. Oh, I don't remember. Let's see if we can do it this way.
I think last time you had everything on your desktop.
I did, but I've got to come in here and, okay, here we go. All right, so we're going to come up to this fun little thing right here. So we're going to start tonight with some really interesting ones. So this is called Bumblefoot, and it's basically a great big zit or pimple that your chicken gets on the bottom of its foot or feet, and it can be painful for the chicken. If you see your chicken starting to limp, you can inspect its feet. If you see something that looks like this, then you have a chicken with Bumblefoot. I've got a hen that gets Bumblefoot all the time. There are different remedies for it. What I do with her is just pop this thing out right here, and it doesn't bother her for me to do that, but some of them are a little bit more deeply embedded, kind of like this one right here. And then that involves soaking the foot in some warm water. Sometimes Epsom salts will help a little bit until you can soften that up enough that you can pry that. It's basically a big lump of dead cells. Sometimes it has infection in it, but not always. it's painful for the chicken because it feels like they're walking on a stone. Like if you get a pebble in your shoe, that's kind of what it feels like for them. So that's why it's important to get it taken care of and to watch your chicken's feet really closely to make sure that they don't get that. Some things that cause it are if your chicken is on really rocky ground or really hard ground, then that can irritate the foot and cause them to get this bumblefoot. So this is just another one that's just starting. You can see it's kind of like a sore right there. That's going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it becomes one of those big areas like we just saw. Now I want to get back up to, we'll just zip through all of these fun ones until we get to here. All right. So all chickens, it doesn't matter how good of a chicken keeper you are, all chickens are going to get or are prone to external parasites. External means that these parasites are on the outside of their body, on their skin and in their feathers. So these right here, let me see if I can, the thing I need to make it bigger is hidden by this thing right here, and I don't know what to do about that. These little things right here are the actual mite. They're called feather mites. This dirt looking stuff that you can see on the feathers is actually the poop from those mites, and it collects on those feathers and actually gums them up. If you have a really bad case, that poop builds up all around the skin and gets really crusty and scaly. It's miserable for the chicken for two reasons. First of all, these mites are sucking the blood out of the chicken. That's what they feed on. And the second thing is that they make the chicken itch really, really bad because they're crawling on the skin. And so the chicken is miserable. So what do we do about these? There are some products. Again, my job is not to tell you how to treat it, but to tell you what to treat. So there are some products that are made specifically for mites. There is a product that I use that is a garden dust, I guess, that when I see this, I sprinkle it on the skin of the bird and it kills them temporarily. The problem is these mites are laying eggs all over on the chicken's skin and on the shafts of the feathers, and those eggs are going to hatch. So you need to retreat with that dusting powder every about once a week. If you've got a chicken with mites, you should be doing that. You can also contact your veterinarian to see what other products can be used. There's some medications that are taken internally for the chicken that can treat those things, and also some things liquids that you can put on the skin. But I don't want to recommend them to you. I want you to contact your vet to get those things because some of them are not labeled for the use in poultry. They're effective, but they're off label for chickens.
Kathy?
So your vet will be able to help you with those. Yes.
We have a question in the chat that they would like to know if they can have permission to screenshot these pictures.
Oh yeah, I took these off of Google. so as long as you're not like selling them or anything, then I think that would be fine. I didn't have any chickens with any mites right now to take pictures of, so they are Google images, and so yeah, that's fine. That's fine to do that. Thanks for watching those chats for me. All right, next, so lice. Let me see if I can get a better picture of those. So these are lice. They're much bigger than the mites are. They're much easier to see. They're a light yellow to white in color, and they're much more obvious. They don't leave any sign per se like the mites do, like the poops and things like that. But if you see your chicken like reaching around and preening itself more than it should be, then it might have lice. Mites are much more common in our area than lice is, but I have seen lice on chickens before. Mites do not like people. So if you have a chicken with mites and you pick it up, the mites might get on you and crawl around for a little while, but they're not going to hang out with you because they don't like people. Lice may stay with you. That it depends on the kind of lice that it is. People can get lice, and it needs to be treated. But like I say, these are not as common as the mites are. So these are what's called, and you can't see them because they're incredibly tiny, but they're called scale mites, and they actually get up underneath the scale of your chicken's legs, and that's where they lay their eggs, and that's where they poop, and they actually cause the scale of the chicken's legs to lift up. So you can see how these scales down here are nice and smooth. These ones are thickened, and they're starting to lift off of the leg of the bird. Sometimes, if you look at your chicken's legs and it kind of looks like this, it just means they're getting ready to shed the outside of these scales, which they do, that they renew their scales all the time on their legs. But if you start seeing them look like this right here, where it's a little bit more raised and it's coming down the leg, and you're seeing a lot of the scales starting to do it, then you might have a problem with scaly leg. It is more difficult to treat than the other kind of mites. Vaseline, I will tell you that Vaseline works really, really well, but you have to get the Vaseline up underneath the scales so that it suffocates those little mites that are causing a problem in there. There are some topical medications and some medications that you actually give the bird that will treat this as well. So a call to the vet if you're seeing scaly leg is a good idea. This is a horrible, horrible case of scaly leg. This poor bird has scale mites all over on its legs and in its feet. And you can see that it's actually causing deformity in the foot and open sores. And this is a miserable, miserable condition for this chicken. It should have been treated a long time ago before it ever got to this condition. I have personally seen chickens with feet this bad, and they are miserable. It can still be treated. This chicken can still be treated, and this will resolve and get better, but we shouldn't ever allow a chicken to get to this point. So it's important to inspect the legs and the feet of your birds. Okay, remember last time we talked about poop, and I mentioned that if you're starting to see foamy poop in your chickens, it could indicate an intestinal parasite or an internal parasite. So external is on the outside of the chicken, internal is on the inside of your chicken. So this is an image of the kind of foamy poop that you might see in that situation. Some of the intestinal parasites that chickens can get, so these are roundworms, and these are worms that are actually, this is poop right here, and the worms are in the poop. If you are actually seeing worms in the feces of your chickens, it means it has a lot of worms in it, because usually those worms just hang out inside the chicken, do their thing, and you never see them. It's not uncommon for chickens to have worms, and chickens can actually do fine with worms, and you'll never know that they have them. They get roundworms from eating things like grasshoppers or earthworms, or eating the poop of other chickens who have roundworms, which sounds disgusting, but it happens. So these kind of worms, they pick up the eggs from bugs and things that they eat, and then those eggs hatch inside of the chicken's intestinal tract. They latch on and they feed off of the blood of the chicken. Unless they have a huge load of these worms, you're never going to know it. The chicken will do fine. If it's a healthy bird, otherwise it's going to do just fine. Can people get roundworms? Yes, people can. That is why it's so important for you to always wash your hands after you work with your chickens. This is another picture of roundworms. Again, a huge load. If you treat your chicken with a dewormer and those worms die, you will see them in the stool of your chicken, in the poop of your chicken. or if your chicken has a major load of worms, then you will see them. Can worms get in the eggs? Yes, but again, I don't want you to think that every egg is going to have a worm in it, because it's not. I have never seen an egg with worms in it, but if your chicken has a major load of worms in it, yes, those worms are going to get in the eggs. This is rare, very rare. I have never seen it personally. These are tapeworms. A chicken will get a tapeworm by eating. The biggest carrier of tapeworms is mice. Do chickens eat mice? Yes. Chickens will eat mice if they have an opportunity to. Remember that chickens are omnivores. They eat vegetable matter and they eat meat. So a chicken will eat a mouse if it has an opportunity to, which puts it at risk for tapeworms. Tapeworms, unless you're eating the intestines of your chicken, you're not going to get tapeworms from your chickens, so you don't need to worry about that. But again, washing your hands is extremely important. So this poor chicken, we're going to start talking about diseases that chickens can get. And I chose diseases that are common to Utah, all of the counties in Utah. This poor chicken has what's called Merrick's disease, M-A-R-E-K-S disease, Merrick's disease. Merrick's disease is a virus, and it's almost guaranteed that every flock of chickens in Utah has the Merrick's disease. The problem arises when you have a bird who is susceptible to that virus and starts showing symptoms. The Merrick's disease is in the wild bird population, so any bird that comes through your property and either lands or poops on your property can carry the Merrick's disease to your property. That's why it's here. There's nothing we can do about it. What we do need to do is recognize it for what it is, and be able to know that that's what it is. Merrick's disease causes 3 different symptoms in chickens. The first one is leg paralysis, leg and wing paralysis, which is what this chicken has. It causes what's called scissor legs. So you can kind of see that this chicken's legs are opposite of each other, like scissors would be. This chicken is paralyzed. It won't be able to walk, and it won't be able to get up and eat and drink. Merrick's disease in chickens who have this symptom is 100% fatal. There's nothing you can do to save the chicken. There's other forms of Merrick's disease. One of them causes blindness. So you can see that the pupil of this chicken, the pupil, the black part is very small, and then you can kind of see this gray area around here. So this chicken is actually blind. Sometimes it only affects one eye, sometimes it affects both eyes. If it affects both eyes, your chicken won't be able to eat or drink, and it will starve to death. This one may or may not be fatal depending on whether one or both eyes are affected. Again, this is a Merrick's disease eye, the cloudiness, the small pupil. I have seen Merrick's disease cause this kind of blindness. It only happened in one eye. The chicken was still able to eat and drink and did fine. So the question is, if you have a chicken with Merrick's disease, does it put the other chickens in your flock at risk? And the answer is yes. Most birds build up an immunity. They'll get the virus, they're able to fight the virus, they don't show any symptoms of it, life goes on. But some chickens are more susceptible to it than others. Some breeds of chicken are more susceptible to it than others. So Merrick's disease is there, but I don't want you to panic about it, but I want you to recognize it for what it is. If you have a chicken that starts to stumble around and act like it's not able to walk, or if it's dragging one leg, or if it's dragging its wings, or if it has symptoms like this, then you need to be a little bit concerned about Merrick's disease. You should separate any sick chicken from your flock, put it in a different area. If you suspect Merrick's disease, you can take your chickens to an animal science laboratory. They can actually do a necropsy and see what your chicken died of. But again, it's here. We don't see it really, really often, but I want you to recognize it for what it is.
Kathy, can you spell
So
it? Can you spell it one more time?
Yep, M-A-R-E-K-S, Merrick's disease.
Thank you.
I've got a message that says Val Bullock, Batty, raised hand. Does somebody else have a question on this, or was that the question? Okay, so another thing that we see, I have never seen this in my personal flock, but I know people in Davis County, Utah County that have seen this, and it may be in other counties, but those are the only two that I am aware of. This is called fowl pox, kind of like chicken pox. But chickens don't get chicken pox, which is weird, but they do get fowl pox. So it's spread by mosquitoes. Again, it's a virus, and it causes these lovely little lesions on the combs and on the face and inside of the mouth of chickens. If you start to see, sometimes you'll see like a scab or two on your chicken's combs, and that might mean that another bird has just pecked on it a little bit. If you're starting to see things like this, where there's more than a few, or if it starts to get down here, around the nose, then you could possibly have a chicken with fowl pox. Again, if you see it, separate the bird from the rest of the flock, see how it does. Most chickens will survive fowl pox and do just fine, unless it gets in their mouth and their throat. If the bird gets lesions like this in its mouth and its throat, it will not eat, and then it will starve. This is another example of it. You can see this is a pretty severe case of it. This poor rooster has it all over his earlobes, on his wattles, all over his comb. All right, Merrick's disease and fowl pox have vaccines that you can give your chickens. Are they very cost effective? No, because the vials that you can buy for these vaccines will treat 1,000 birds at a time. And each vial costs around $30 to $40. So you're only using, if you hatch out 10 chicks, you're only using 10 doses of that vaccine. And the question is it really necessary? That's up to you. People who raise a lot of birds, it might be more cost effective for them than people who just raise a few birds. Hatcheries always vaccinate against Merrick's disease. They can do that because they hatch out thousands and thousands and thousands of chicks. So it's more cost effective for them to do it. For us here, it's not necessarily something that we need to do. Either Merrick's disease or fowl pox. I know breeders who vaccinate for fowl pox because they have it in their flock. So it makes sense for them to do it. But unless it's a major problem, it's not necessary, but there are vaccines for them. All right, the other common thing that we see in our Utah chickens is respiratory diseases. I couldn't find a lot of really good pictures for respiratory disease, but things to watch for are just like with us. If we get a cold, what are we going to get? We're going to get sneezes, we're going to get coughs, runny noses, watery eyes. It's the same thing for chickens. So this chicken has a watery eye, its mouth is open, which means it's having a little bit of a problem breathing. I'm not seeing any nasal discharge to show that it's got a runny nose, but this bird has an upper respiratory infection. It just looks like it doesn't feel good. So if your chicken is coughing, sneezing, or has discharge from its eyes or nose, again, separate it from the rest of the flock. Usually they will recover depending on what kind of respiratory infection it is, but sometimes they don't. Birds don't handle respiratory infections really well. And especially in the wintertime, it's difficult for them to fight the infections, but it's not impossible. Drafts, a drafty barn is one of the main reasons that chickens will get a respiratory infection. And if one gets it, then it's highly likely that the other ones are going to get it. That's why it's important to quarantine them from the rest of the flock. There's a big word that we are all familiar with right now: quarantine your bird from the rest of the flock. Which brings us now to, I promised you last week that we'd kind of go through the anatomy of a chicken. So we're going to start up here. Everybody thinks that chickens are stupid. And sometimes they are, and that's because they really don't have a very big brain. Their brain is enough for them to know how to eat and how to drink, how to get away from predators, and how to make new chickens. That's all their brain needs to tell them, and that's all it does tell them. Some people can teach their chicken tricks. I've seen that. It takes a lot of work, but it's not impossible. This is the neck bone, like your neck bone right here. This is the trachea. This is where the food goes down, enters the crop right here. So that's why after your chickens eat, sometimes you'll see a bulge right here. This is where the food all goes to start. This little pink tube right here is the esophagus. Look back up on those two. This is the esophagus. This is the trachea. This is what leads to the lungs. I find it very interesting that the lungs are right here, right next to the back. We usually think of lungs being in this area, but a chicken's lungs are right here. Another interesting thing about chickens is they don't have a diaphragm. So people have a diaphragm that separates their lungs and their heart from their stomach and their liver and their intestines. Chickens don't have that. And I'm not sure what the reason is for that, but I do know that they do not have a diaphragm. This is your cute little heart right here, liver, the spleen, all the things that we have, but they do have something that we don't. This is the gizzard. Last time somebody asked where the gizzard is. Remember, the gizzard is what grinds up the chicken's food for it. So after the chicken eats its food, it goes here in the crop, and then it works its way down into here and enters the gizzard, and that's what grinds up all of the chicken's food and makes it easier for them to digest it. So that's where the gizzard is. We've got our ovaries right here. This is what makes the eggs, and you can see that this is the eggs in different stages of development, which is fascinating. So bigger eggs here, small, small, small. These eggs are going to be laid a lot later than these ones are. The eggs come through this cute little tube right here. They're stored in here for a little while, and then when the chicken lays an egg, it comes out of this part right here, which is called a cloaca, and that's where the chicken lays its egg. This is the intestines. This is where all the food goes. The chicken also poops out of this place right here. Kidneys. Another interesting thing is the kidneys are right along the back as well, which I find interesting. So this is all fascinating, everything, how this chicken is put together and how everything works. Do any of you ever process your own chickens, or eat your own chickens? It's interesting if you do that to just kind of take a look inside and see how the chicken's put together. All right, so that is
We do have a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to come up here. If anybody can figure out how to get me back on my full screen, that would be awesome. I don't know why I can't ever figure that out.
So you want to go back to your desktop? Is that what you want to do, or you want to go to your Zoom?
I want to go back to, yeah, so that we're full screen on the meeting, so you're not still seeing.
So you can stop sharing. So just hover down towards the bottom of your screen, and it should pop up a ribbon.
Okay. And my screen is up here now, so let me see. No, that's not it.
I can stop it.
Thank you. Thanks for looking out for me.
You betcha.
All right, so let's go to our chat. which now I need to find that again.
So down at the bottom, click on, just hover towards down at the bottom, and there should be a button that says chat.
Which it was, and now I've lost it.
So it kind of disappears unless you hover back over it sometimes.
Let me come up here and see. I might have to have somebody read them for me. I
can read them. One of the questions, let me see, let me go back a little bit. One of the questions was, if you have to give them a vaccine, how do you do it?
So most vaccines need to be given in the first 2 days after the chicken hatches. And most vaccines will come with a little tiny needle, a syringe and a needle. You mix the vaccination up, and then you just put a tiny, it's like a drop of vaccine underneath the skin. So you lift up the wing, there's some loose skin right there, and you just put the needle underneath that loose skin and put a little tiny drop of vaccine in there. It's easy to do. Is this my chat now? Did you find it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not seeing any of the chats though. I see who sent them. So it's not hard to do, but it does require a steady hand. Usually it takes 2 people to do it. It's easier that way. Not hard, but it's, unless you're doing like a whole bunch of chickens at the same time, again, you're wasting a lot of vaccine on those vials. All right, Brandy, I'm going to have you read them because I'm not seeing them.
That's not a problem. The next question was, what is the cause of a respiratory disease?
So usually a virus. Usually a virus is what causes it. Again, there's viruses out there, passed from chicken to chicken. Wild birds can bring viruses in. I should mention that turkeys and ducks will not get, they're immune to Merrick's disease for some reason. I don't know why, and they're actually doing research to see why that is. Turkeys do not get Merrick's disease, and ducks and geese do not get Merrick's disease. Respiratory illnesses are usually caused by a virus. If a draft will weaken a bird and make it more susceptible to viruses and things like that. There's also bacterial viruses that birds can get. It just seems like respiratory infections, they're just built to get them, and they can be treated. There's antibiotics that will treat the bacterial infections. Again, that requires advice from a veterinarian. But yeah, viruses are usually the big one.
So there's another question, but I have a second follow-up question on that. And that is, can turkeys and chickens pass diseases back and forth to each other? And is there any reason to not house them together for that reason?
There's not any more different than housing chickens together. Turkeys obviously won't get Merrick's disease from chickens. And it's interesting because turkeys can actually pass their immunity onto chickens through their poop. It's beneficial for chickens to have turkey manure to eat because it does help with the immunity for Merrick's disease, which is weird. It's very interesting and fascinating, but there are actually people who do house turkeys with chickens for that very purpose.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question was, how long do you have to quarantine your chicken?
Until it's better.
Okay, that's easy.
Until it is feeling much better and is no longer showing symptoms of the illness. That's how long and everybody should have a place on their property where they can quarantine a sick bird. It doesn't have to be big, but it does have to be someplace that is draft free and someplace that they can easily access food and water. But the quarantine is until the chicken either passes away or gets better.
Okay. The next question is, do male chickens also have ovaries?
No, they do not. They do have, is it okay for me to use the correct language for the reproductive system? They have testicles, they do. That's where they produce their part of the reproductive process. So, and those testicles are actually located up by the kidneys on the back, which is interesting, again, that's where they're located. But no, they do not have ovaries. Good question though. Does a hen have to have a rooster to produce eggs? And the answer is no. A lot of people think they do, but they do not. Hens will lay eggs regardless. A single hen on your farm will produce eggs. She doesn't need other chickens around in order to do that.
Okay. The next question is, should you deworm your chicken? And if yes, how often?
So yes, chickens should be dewormed, especially if they are free-ranging chickens, meaning that they're out about on your property eating whatever they want. Then yes, they should be dewormed. A good rule of thumb is once a month, because as the worms go through their life cycle, they're laying eggs. And so those eggs are hatching every 2 to 3 weeks and making new worms. Is it practical to deworm chickens? It depends on how many's in your flock. If you only have 2 or 3 and it's easy to catch them and deworm them once a month, then that's how often you should do it. I usually do mine once every 3 months, but sometimes it doesn't happen for every 6 months. So I do it at least twice a year. And that seems to do the trick. They seem to do okay with all of that.
Okay, the next question is, if one of your chickens get one of these diseases or virus, are they safe to consume or should they be disposed of?
It depends on the illness. In fact, I was reading an article today about Merrick's disease, and somebody asked that question: is it safe to eat a chicken that has Merrick's disease? And the short answer was yes, it is. You're not going to get Merrick's disease from your chickens, either by being around them or by eating them. But the other question is, how sick was the chicken? Did it die of the Merrick's disease, or did you butcher it yourself? My rule of thumb is, when in doubt, don't. That's kind of how I feel about it. If your chicken has a respiratory illness and you know it's probably going to die and you want to butcher it and eat it, that's fine. If your chicken died from Merrick's disease, I personally wouldn't, but that's just me. But I don't think there's a problem with it. I'm trying to think of a situation where it absolutely would not be a good idea. And the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is there are worms that can get into the meat of a chicken. We don't have them very often around here, but it is a possibility. You would obviously know that chicken was very sick and would be able to see the worms in the meat of that bird. It would not be a good idea to eat that bird. I really can't think of any other situation. Foulpox, it's fine. Merrick's disease can sometimes cause lesions on the skin itself. That's another presentation of it. You'll see lesions on the skin, and if you do a necropsy on the bird, there's lesions or sores internally on the bird. And definitely in that situation, I would not consume the bird. But for the most part, it is safe to eat the chicken. If I'm trying to think if there's any other, I can't think of any other situation where it would not be okay to consume it.
Okay.
Good question.
Can chickens eat bananas?
I believe so, yes. I wouldn't feed them just bananas, but as a treat, I think that would certainly be okay.
Okay. We have actually 2 questions on how do you deworm a chicken, and then part 2 of that, are they more apt to get worms in the summer versus the winter?
Good questions. How to deworm a chicken. There are different products, again, available to do that. And it just depends on what product you get. There are products that you feed to the bird so that it actually goes down into their body. And then that's just a matter of picking up the bird, opening its beak, and putting the liquid in, or the paste. Sometimes a paste is used. There's also what's called topical solutions, where you put the liquid on the skin of the bird, it's absorbed into the tissue, and then systemically goes throughout the whole system. It gets into the blood supply and goes throughout the whole system. That's actually easier than giving the dewormer orally, but those products are usually more expensive to use.
Okay.
Oh, and far more likely to get worms in the summertime than in the winter time, especially roundworms, because A, freezing temperatures kill the eggs of roundworms, and B, grasshoppers, earthworms, things like that are not around in the wintertime. Tapeworms, on the other hand, are year-round because sometimes mice are actually more prevalent in the wintertime because they're seeking shelter in your barns and things. So tapeworms are probably more prevalent in the wintertime.
Okay. This is another question about Merrick's disease. It's kind of a two-part question. One is, can humans get Merrick's disease? And would you say that Merrick's disease is basically polio for chickens?
Okay, good questions. Humans cannot get Merrick's disease. Humans cannot get fowl pox. Intestinal parasites, it's more of an issue for people, but those two other ones, no. The answer is no. They are not what's called zoonotic, which is your big word of the day, meaning that it's passed from one species to the other. Merrick's disease, no. Fowl pox, no. What was the second part?
Would you say that Merrick's is like polio for chickens?
That's a good way of looking at it, I guess, because it does cause the paralysis. It's interesting because it usually only causes paralysis on one side of the body. So one leg seems to be working okay, but the other one doesn't. But because they can't walk on one leg, it does effectively make it so they're paralyzed. It also paralyzes the wings. I don't know if it's ever been studied to be kind of like polio, but it basically does the same thing.
Okay, so we have just one more question in the chat, and that is, what is more healthy for a chicken, being inside or outside?
I would say a combination of both is actually the best for the chicken. A place where it has shelter, can get out of the weather, and has access to fresh, unfrozen water in the wintertime, and fresh water in the heat of the summer. But it's important for chickens to be outside as well. So we all know that the sun provides a very important vitamin for people, and that vitamin is vitamin D. And if a chicken is inside of a barn all the time, they're not going to get that important nutrient that they need. They're not getting access to the sunshine, which helps them to process, to make vitamin D. And then they need vitamin D to keep their calcium up. Does that all make sense? So it's important for chickens to get sunshine. It's important for chickens to be chickens, running around on the grass, doing what they do, scratching for bugs, and all of that makes for a very happy and healthy chicken. But shelter is important as well. These are all very good questions. You guys are awesome.
So that is all the questions that we have right now in the chat.
Okay, so we're going to end a little tiny bit early tonight, but I think that's okay. Next time, instead of talking about all these nasties, we're going to start talking about incubation. We're going to start with the eggs and look at eggs and how they are made and why they are made the way they are. And I'm kind of looking forward to these next two sessions that we're going to have, because they're the fun part of having chickens. So in the meantime, between now and next time, so for the next 2 weeks, I want you to be thinking about questions that you have as far as the eggs. We're not going to get into incubation until the time after that, but start thinking about questions you have about eggs and chicks and those kinds of things. We're going to have a good time.
Okay, so there was one more question that came up.
Okay.
Can chickens get sunburned?
Yes, they actually can. It's unusual for them to get sunburned. They would have to be, that's why shade is important. They would have to be stuck out in the sun all the time. The chickens that I raise, in order to have them look what they need to look like for a show, for a chicken show, they have to have a very dark face, and time in the sun is important for that, so that that face gets suntanned a little bit and goes dark like it's supposed to. But yes, they can sunburn. A chicken that is molting, and I guess we never discussed molting. Let's take a few minutes and do that real quick. It's not necessarily a disease, but it's something that you need to be aware of. At least once a year, and sometimes twice a year, a chicken will replace every feather that it has grown. The old feather will fall out, a new feather will grow in. I've had chickens molt so heavily that their bare skin was exposed. And in the summertime, that can be an issue because then that skin will become sunburned. I had a chicken drop every feather she had in the middle of winter, and it was below zero. And I was like, I don't even know what to do with you, dear, because I can't bring you inside until all your feathers grow back. So I told her she was on her own, and she survived and did fantastic in sub-zero weather out in the barn. She never had an issue. She huddled between her companions, her other friends at night, but she did really, really well. In the summertime, chickens who molt heavily and have exposed skin, they need to have access to shade so that that skin doesn't sunburn, because I have seen that happen as well. In the wintertime, combs, the combs and the wattles, especially on roosters, are prone to frostbite. And so sometimes you'll see the points on the comb turn black and they'll fall off, and that's due to frostbite. There's not really a whole lot you can do about that. It just happens, and the chicken does okay with that. In the summertime, the combs can sunburn as well. I've never seen that happen, but it can happen. Good questions, guys. So the question was about sunburning. Yes, it can happen. It can happen. So provide shade and shelter for your birds. Got another question?
There is one more question. I'm not understanding it. So what is worse, cold or hot, like summer or winter?
Like we discussed last time, chickens do much better in cold weather than in really, really hot weather. I've had chickens die in hot weather. I've never had a chicken die in cold weather. They do not handle the heat well. Remember, we talked about how a chicken's temperature is 104 to 105 degrees. That's normal for them. And so they actually are more comfortable in cooler weather than they are in the summertime heat. Shade and water, that's very important in the summertime. So heat is actually harder on chickens than the cold is. And I think I saw a question, they're coming through and I can read them when they first pop up, but then they disappear, about what is frostbite. Frostbite is where it's so cold that it actually freezes the tissue on the comb, and it freezes it so hard. So if you've ever been outside and your fingers get cold, they get cold faster than the rest of your body, and they start to hurt and they start to ache. That's called the extremities. Your extremities get cold faster than the rest of your body. The comb on a chicken is an extremity, so it freezes faster than the rest of the body does. And so frostbite is where the tissue actually freezes and it kills that tissue, and then that part of the comb will die and will fall off. That's what frostbite is. I think I saw another question pop up, but I can't see it now.
That question was, well, really quickly, let me address one other question. Are we going to talk about turkeys? Yes, we will talk about turkeys when Kathy is finished with all of what she has to teach us about chickens. So if that ends before class 5, the class 5 will be turkeys. And if we have enough chicken material to finish through class 5, then we will add a class 6, and that will be turkeys. And we will have a representative from the 4-H state turkey show to be here to talk to us about how to order poults and a little bit more care about turkeys. So that will happen a little later. Okay, let's see. This question was, you said that chicken lice was uncommon here. Why is that? And if your chicken does get lice, how would you take care of it?
So I'm not really sure why it's more uncommon than mites are. That's a very good question that I'm going to say I don't know. It may be that our climate is not conducive to lice being happy, because we do have changing season and the temperature changes a lot. That might be part of it. Lice tend to like temperatures that are always the same, and they prefer warmer temperatures. So that's probably part of it, is the changing seasons that we have. The treatment for lice is kind of the same as the treatment for mites. Dusting powders. There's an important reason why chickens do dust baths. And part of that reason is it helps to control the mites and the external parasites that they have. If they get enough dust on their body, the mites and the lice can't breathe. And so that's part of the reason that chickens do dust baths. There's different products out there that you can add to their dusting area. Are they effective? Not really. The most effective treatment is where you actually put something on the area that the lice and the mites are. And those areas are around the vent where the egg comes and the poop comes out. That's the main area that mites and lice like to live, and underneath the wings. Those are two of the main areas. And so if you want to see if your chicken has mites, those are the places to look. Garden or poultry dust are effective. Those are things that I can in good confidence recommend to you. If you want to start looking at topical ointments and things like that, then I'm going to have you check with your vets to do that. You can research online and find different places that will help you figure out how to treat those things. I personally use the dusting powder a lot, especially if I see a chicken that has quite a few mites. Then I'll just pull out the dusting powder and give it a good dusting, and then I'll check it again in a week to see how things look. The topical ointments and things like that, they tend to be a little bit longer lasting than the powder does. But the treatment for both is basically the same for mites and for lice.
And where would they pick up lice from?
Other birds, wild birds tend to carry lice. Any of the wild birds can have lice. It's not uncommon for that to happen. Lice usually happens on birds that are compromised in some way. Does that make sense? So they're not the healthiest of birds. The lice get on them because they're easy prey for the lice. Like I say, it's really not common. Mites are the same thing. Mites come from any animal that's coming through your property, be it bird or other animals can carry mites. It's not common, but wild birds especially are bringing mites. But mites tend to just live where birds live because that's what they feed off of is yummy bird blood. So it's a normal part of having chickens. It's not that anybody's doing anything wrong. It just happens. Mites like chickens.
Can frostbite kill a chicken?
It can. If a chicken gets frostbite, if it gets cold enough that it's freezing the comb, and those temperatures are going on for extended periods of time, then yes, cold can take a toll on a chicken. It's not the frostbite itself that's killing the chicken, it's the prolonged exposure to freezing temperatures that's killing the chicken. It is interesting, if a rooster's comb freezes enough, it will make that rooster infertile. He won't be able to fertilize eggs, because the comb is actually an important part of the rooster's reproductivity. Is that a word? His ability to reproduce is affected by his comb. So if it freezes bad, then it can cause him to become infertile, and he won't be able to fertilize eggs. So that's kind of interesting too. I have never seen frostbite or freezing temperatures kill a chicken. Personally, I've never seen that, but I have seen frostbitten combs and toes. Remember, we talked about how roosting is important so the bird can sit on their toes and keep them warm. That protects their feet and their toes from frostbite.
Okay. One more question. Is there any food or vegetable to feed them to help prevent parasites or worms?
Good question. There is some people who think that pumpkin seeds are a natural dewormer. My humble opinion is that is not true. Pumpkin seeds are yummy for chickens. It's a good snack for them. They think they're yummy, but I don't think they have any ability to prevent or kill intestinal parasites. You might get people who disagree with that, but that is my personal opinion. There's not anything I know of natural food that will deworm your poultry.
Okay. We have a reproductive question. When does a rooster stop being productive? Is there a way to tell?
When they die. That's also a good question. I think a rooster is fertile and productive up until the day he dies, unless he has some kind of an illness or injury that inhibits that. Males are built to make babies. That's what they do. Females, on the other hand, your hens, have a reproductive life, and it varies from breed to breed, but usually a hen is productive for about 3 years, sometimes 5, and I've actually seen chickens who are 8 who will occasionally still be laying eggs. But age does not tend to make a difference in the roosters.
Okay, there's no more questions.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right. So this was kind of a not fun discussion, sick chickens and all, but important to know for the health of your flock, and so you know what to be watching for. A healthy chicken is a chicken who will lay eggs. A healthy rooster is a rooster who will make babies. And so those things are important if you want to have your flock continue, and if you want to be able to get eggs from your chickens, and if you want to get fertile eggs so that you can hatch them out and have chicks. These are important things to know. All right, everybody, I think that's it. We'll get into the fun stuff next time. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Okay, so for everyone, for our next class in 2 weeks, the link will stay the same, but I will always send you the day of the class another email that has the link in it. So make sure that you're registered on Z Suites for the class. If you didn't get an email, it's because you weren't registered for the class. So if you have any questions, ask your 4-H leader or your 4-H office. Okay. All right. Thank you, Kathy. We so much appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Bless you.